I'm aware of the time. There's no way that I can do what I wanted to do in the time that's left for a reasonable ending time. So perhaps what I could do is just spend a few minutes on the first bit of what I was going to do, and then I was going to go into detail doing a processing of a planet image with Registax. That's all I was going to do. But I'd like to do, especially seeing as this conjunction is coming up, it might be useful for you to give you some ideas that I find helpful for the actual photographing. So would you like to spend just a few minutes looking at the photographing aspect of it rather than the processing? As I say, the processing would take at least 20 minutes. I don't want to take that off your time. How do you feel, or would you prefer to end it now? It's 9:20. How do people feel?
I think I'm happy to go through it.
Okay.
If anybody wants to speak, either unmute or hold down.
If I wonder if you could make me a speaker view, and then I can show you a few. Well, before that, let me share a screen with you, and I'm having David's trouble now. I've got
we'll have to use that as a technical term from now on.
Dave's trouble.
Dave's trouble. Yeah.
That's interesting. I've got an application going which is just a movie, and it is not giving me that as an option to share. It's giving me others, but not that one.
Little more windows button. I noticed that on mine earlier. Or a scroll bar.
Where do you get more windows?
Well, at first there's a little button on the bottom right saying more windows. And then when I press that, you get a scroll bar thing. You can scroll down through lots of different windows. I've got too many windows open here.
I'll just close down things that you don't need.
Well, I'll take the Registax off because we're not going to use that anymore. Interesting, Registax is still there. And I've got things here that I've not got on. It's all very interesting, this. Can I just try sharing again?
Yeah, we can
it
see
thinks that I am sharing.
I think you're sharing screen. Yeah.
Right, I'll just try again.
You can share your screen and then go to the particular window.
Yeah.
The only thing is, if you've got windows you don't particularly want people to see.
No, not at all. It just says share screen.
You can see your web browser now.
See it now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See a picture of a planet.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. So this is a movie that I got. Not 4 minutes by any means. I usually go for half a minute, and I'll just play it just to show you the sort of thing. This was Jupiter, I think, 2018, where it was, you know, higher in the sky, so it's a much better quality planet. And if you have a look, you find that just every now and then, I'll do it again, you get the most incredible image. You get a really sharp image, or set of images. You can also see, going from what appears to be right to left, you can see almost like clouds. It's not clouds, it's convection. Just do it again. So you got rubbishy images all mixed up, but every now and then it clarifies. So that's why Dan was not processing all his images. He was just getting the very clever Registacks to. Okay, I'll get rid of that if I can, and stop sharing. And just process a certain percentage. And looking at that video that you've just seen, what percentage do you think I should go for? How many, what percentage of those frames do you think were any good? It's a difficult balance. The less frames you use, the worse Registacks will work, but those few frames are better. So what would you reckon?
20%.
Maybe, yeah.
Hold down your space bar if you want to talk. Anybody?
About 10%.
Well, let's unmute ourselves, shall we?
Yeah.
Let's all unmute ourselves so we can have a chat. This is what I think I took it with, and it's. I mean, Dan's camera is a full frame camera, full 35mm frame. Mine is a lot different. And if you can see a little tiny square in there, can you?
Yeah.
That's 1/3 of an inch diagonal. It's like sort of centimetre diagonal. So it's not much, is it? And yet, you wouldn't believe it, but that can get almost the whole of the moon in quite a decent focal length telescope, almost. Using this just to get everything in the centre, I usually use 3 images to stitch together to get a whole moon's width. So you'd be surprised what you can get with just a small thing. My pixel size is about 3 microns. Dan was talking about 6, so Dan does need more magnification than I do, because Dan has got an awful lot of wasted space that I wouldn't have, because he's using a whole 35mm frame of bigger pixel size. So Dan must go for bigger magnifications. The trouble with using 2 Barlows is that the whole structure gets a bit unwieldy and it doesn't stay in line with the axis of the instrument. Usually gravity pulls it down. So, you know, the more Barlows you put together, the worse it gets. So if you're using Barlows, it'd be nice to have one 5 times rather than, you know, two 2 times or something like that. Personally, I would go for the proper T2 connection in the middle of the back of the telescope. Get rid of the the diagonal, because you don't need it, and that's only giving you extra irregularities in the surface of the mirror. So it'd be better to get rid of all that, just use the screw connection at the back, and maybe invest in a 2 times photographic converter or a 2-inch Barlow, if you can have a 2-inch adapter attached to your T2 at the back. I don't know. There's various ways of doing it, and then you'll be using the whole of the frame of the camera for other things when you're photographing galaxies and things like that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah, I got a 2-inch back.
It's up to you.
Or a 2-inch adapter for my camera, so I can do
Weight
that.
against that is that you might be kneeling down trying to look up into the camera, because I don't think your screen rotates, does it? Or does it?
Well, no, but I was doing it via USB into the laptop anyway, so.
Oh, right. So
It's not a
you've no problems there.
I was a bit concerned that you just got this one clip holding the camera in case it slipped off. I was worried it was going to fall off the back of the telescope like that. I think that was the main reason I used the diagonal. It seemed a bit more
Right.
stable.
Well, using this is one of these, what are they called? ZWO cameras. This is one of the cheapest versions of their Planetary cameras. You can get very posh ones costing a lot of money. I think I paid about 160 for this, something like this. But it's getting on a bit, this now. I think the modern counterpart is using USB 3. Mine is just a USB 2. That's all they had at the time. So it might well be improved. It also doubles as a guide scope. It's got a little extra socket in there, as well as the ordinary USB socket. It's got another one that you can use with a computer in your telescope and use it for guiding when you're doing long exposures. This thing goes down to something silly like a millionth of a second exposure time, right up to something else silly, something like a few minutes exposure time. So in theory, you can take deep sky images with this as well. I don't think it'll be too good with H alpha, but at least it'll be okay for small objects that don't go over the sides of the little sensor. Going back to planets, you're looking at that movie and you're saying to yourself, well, what exposure should I use? And if you use a long exposure time, let's pretend, I don't know, a tenth of a second, if you use that, you're going to catch more thermal vibration in the atmosphere, instability. So that's not a good idea. I always go for the shortest time I can get away with exposure time in my frames, and that's usually for me something like about 3 milliseconds of exposure time, and I'll be capturing about 50 to 100 frames in a second, something like that. So that's what I'm doing. And my telescope is an 8-inch Newtonian. So if you use the shortest time you can freeze the Jupiter more and more. So you're not as susceptible to the heat, making your image go mad because you're sort of freezing it. The trouble there is that your image will then be too dim to use because your exposure times are too small. So what can you do? You can increase your sensitivity, or with an SLR, it'll be your ISO. Doing that will have several bad effects on your image as well. It'll probably increase the apparent pixel size, and you won't get as good sort of depth of the image. You won't get your grays, your in-between values as marked as if you use a lower, more normal sensitivity. So can you see that it's all swings and roundabouts? It's like Dan said, it's an art rather than a science, and you just got to go by trial and error. So anyhow, that's what I do nowadays. I treat myself to 1 minute of exposure, and the file that I generate, an AVI movie file, is often about over 100 megabytes in size. It's a lot. In fact, I'm going daft here. It's over a gigabyte in size sometimes. You've got to have a computer and your processing and everything to suit that. A gigabyte is and a storage capacity that can suit that. So everything I produce, I put on a hard drive. In fact, I've got it plugged in here, little hard drive. So that's what I always use. I don't bother with the computer's memory. I don't want to clog it up with lots of astronomical photos. So there you go. Another thing that you might like to think about is, obviously, a planet. Try and get it due south. Try and do it at the time when it's due south, because then it's highest in the sky. Because the other thing to think about is how low it is in the sky. I know we're all hoping to catch Hubble quality images of this conjunction next week. But, quite honestly, at 12 degrees high altitude, we're not going to do that, are we? Of Jupiter and Saturn together. So the least we can, well, yeah, the least we can do is in this particular case, catch it as soon as you see it in the earliest part of the evening when it's nearest to south. So there you go. So
Sorry,
perhaps,
sorry.
I was just going to finish by saying perhaps next time I'll show you my version of Registax and what I could do with that image. I'll do that another time. Go on, Dave.
Sorry, I was just going to say there's a field near me. Unfortunately, I don't do photography, but it's only about 5-10 minutes walk from here. You've got an open field and it faces south. You'd easily get 10-12 degrees there. There's just a few little tiny trees, but you could still do it, still get it, I'm sure.
Well, I say south. You won't see it in the evening south. Nowadays it's southwest.
Southwest, yeah.
So that's as near to south as you're going to get. The video that I showed you was taken from my garden, and that does actually overlook the centre of Leeds. So that's a very good reason why you're seeing all the instability that you are. It makes an amazing difference if you can get out in the countryside. Another thing about magnification, I'm just thinking out loud, is it's all very well saying, right, let's go for 6 times magnification. But the more you go for, it's incredibly difficult to get the darn thing in the field of view, to actually find it. I usually start off this with no Barlows at all, and then I might go to a 2 times, and I got a 3 times, I even got a 5 times. But you know, by the time you've got to recenter it each time, and it's quite difficult when you get to 5 times. So that's a good reason for not going overboard on the magnification.
My tracking's
Plus
usually not
the
great.
image goes, sorry, the image goes dimmer as well. The as well as it going bigger, the image will go dimmer. So the dimmer the image, the more time per frame, exposure time, and that will give you more heat distortion. So it's all swings and roundabouts. Sorry, I interrupted someone then.
No, I was just saying that my tracking, I don't know if it would hold it in the middle of the image if it's too magnified, because the tracking's not normally great. It wanders around.
Everyone's is like that.
Okay.
For planets, you're using your telescope at its most extreme, aren't you?
Highest magnification, yeah.
Okay, well, it's 20 to 10, so I suppose we better call it a day. And all the best to everyone, not only for Christmas, but for the Great Conjunction.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember what actual date it is?
21st.
21st.
Monday.
Lucky that it's on the shortest day.
I suggest you start looking well before then, because the odds on the 21st being clear is very poor.